So today is the yortzeit of my late wife, Zechroina Levrocha. So the title we learned today should be Le'ilui Nishmosa, Pesiente Bas Harav Rabbi Soal Arya. The title we learned should be Le'ilui Nishama, and she should be a Melitzas Yosha, and we should only share B'Soides Toivis. So this week for me and my family was a very interesting week with mixed feelings, like a pendulum swinging from one side to the other. So Wednesday night we had a big chasana. My grandson got married, and we danced till 4 o'clock in the morning. I left at 3, but they kept on dancing till 4:30. And a day later we were in the basic chorus, to say Tehillim. And that's Jewish life. That's what our life is about, We dance when we need to dance, and we cry when we need to cry, and the Kodesh Baruch Hu dances with us and cries with us, and that is what life is all about. So the young couple should build a Bayis Gol B'Yisrael, and my wife should be a Meretz Yosha for the entire family and for all the children and great-grandchildren. And the topic we were discussing today is a relevant topic to what I just mentioned. So in this week's parasha, the end of the parasha, the story of Miriam that developed, she was a leper. I don't know whether you know what leprosy is. Leprosy is tzarahas. And Aaron turns to Moshe Rabbeinu. This is our sister. Do something about it. And he davens keil nu rafon olah, and she has a refuah shalema. So the topic is tefillah al hacholim. So source number 1, 2, 3. Is a famous machlokes we spoke about many times. Is tefillah a mitzvah d'oraisa or not? The Rambam Shitta is mitzvahs asay lehispalel bekol yom, as we see in source number 2, and the same as source number 1. Sefer HaMitzvahs, Hilchos Tefillah. The opinion of the Rambam is a person needs to daven every day. What, how, when is not Menatayre. It's your choice. You could daven in Alois Shachar, Chatzois Laila throughout the day. How to daven, what to say, everybody from his heart. But everybody has a mitzvah to daven once a day, and the Ramban disagrees. And the Ramban says Tefillah is midrabanan. If Tefillah would be the Oraisa, says the Ramban, it is only b'shas tzorah. And what the Ramban means is Tzoras Rabim. 50% of Masechet Tanis is all about Seder HaTfilah when tragedy strikes Klal Yisrael, not the individual. When there's famine or an epidemic, a megaphone, Seder HaTfilah. And the Tfilas Tanis is Chov Dalet Brochas. Instead of 18 or 19, it is 24 brachas, which we don't say today. Sefer Chasidim, and that is source number 4, is a big chiddush. מפני שיסו ערבים זה לזה, לכך כשצער בו על אחד, חייבם כולם להצטער ולהספר. Not only when there's a tzara for the entire community or a city, even when an individual is ill or in tsar, we all need to feel his pain, and we all need to daven. Shenemar, and he quotes a posuk in Tehillim, David HaMelech says, Va'ani, b'chalutam, when they become ill, levushi sak, I wear rags, v'tfilosi el cheiki toshuv. Uchsiv, tfilosi el cheiki toshuv, ve'im lo yehoyem espara lo yechoyta. And he quotes a posuk in Shmuel, Cholila li machtoi l'Hashem melechet dol leitpalel ba'adchem. And now he says a gavaldige chiddush that is difficult to understand. V'davka kishenishmoem elav. Sharei samach loi v'horeisi oisam b'derech hatoive v'hayeshor ochsiv. Achiru es Hashem v'avadet amoisa b'yemes. Sharei anovi tzorech loime b'tfilos eraboni shaloilam. כבר שמעו לי מה שהוריסי יסם לעשות לצונכו. גם אתה עשה חפצי. So the Sefer Hasidim, who knows who was the Sefer Hasidim? And Obviously, he was a chassid. Was he a direct Talmud of the Baal Shem Tov, or who was the Sefer Chassidim? Who knows? Who was the Sefer Chassidim? What was his name? Yeah, I don't know his full name, but maybe he was a chassid. How long ago did he live? Almost 1,000 years ago, 900 years ago. And he was Rosh V'Rishon HaChasidei Ashkenaz. So obviously he wasn't the Talmud of the Baal Shem Tov, and there were Hasidim before the Baal Shem Tov came around. So the Sefer Hasidim says, you need to daven for other people when they're ill, but only if they listen to your Musar. And the Navi turns to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and says, I told them what they need to do, I told them where they need to be mischazik, and they took upon themselves, and therefore send the refuah shleima. But if they don't listen to him, he doesn't need to daven for them, which is a gewaltige chiddush. The Navi is a Navi. Maybe it's a different story. So the Sefer Hasidim says, when one person is ill, everybody needs to daven for him. But only in the condition, if he could turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and say, they did tshuva, so please send the refuah shleima. However, I think the mitzvah to daven for a choila is not only based on Tehillim, it's a halacha mefureshes. And it is part of the halacha and the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim. So let's have a look at how the Rambam and the Ramban describe the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim. Source number 5. Hanechnas levakas hachoil lo yeshev lo al gabe mito v'lo al gabe kisa v'lo al gabe safsa v'lo al gabe mukum gabe v'lam l'shoysa mis'ate v'yoshev lemata m'l'shoysa u'mevakesh olev rachamim v'yotze mevakesh olev rachamim. That is the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim. And that is why it is important to see. Because when you see a man in pain, it touches your heart and you'll daven better. When you just mention a person you don't know and you don't feel his pain, it's not the same. So the Rambam clearly says, Mavakesh olav rachamim v'yotzei. We go over to source number 7. Shamina orach lebikar cholim kedei sheyechabda v'yeh b'tzelefonim v'yaseh tzucham atzricham loi v'oid kedei sheyechaven dato l'rachamim v'yevakesh olav. And now comes a shocking line. Hamavakar esachoyle v'loi bikesh rachamim lo kiyeh mitzvah. And this is so important to know because we're good people and we go to Bikur Cholim all the time. And the Ramban says, you went to visit a choyle and you didn't daven for him, you have no mitzvah at all. Lo kiyeh mitzvah zu. And the tour, we don't have the tour, but we do have the Ramah. Ein mavaken esachoyle gemeshos l'shoyne shel yom, v'lo yochesh levakesh olav rachman gemeshos, hago. Kol shebiker v'lo bikesh olav rachmim lo kiyeh mitzvah. So obviously the Ramah is based on the Ramban, which is also quoted by the Tur. So the chiyuv of tefillah, we don't need to base this on a posuk in Tehillim. That is the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim. And if you visit a choyle and you don't daven for him, lo kiyeh mitzvah. And that is a very harsh statement. And most people aren't aware of this. It is about levakesh olav rachamim. And not only is it upon other people levakesh olav rachamim, source number 8 is a Gemara. Dorosh Pinchas bar Choma, kol sheyesh lo choyle b'terech beisei yelech etzel chochem v'yevakesh olav rachamim. And that is the source that people come to Gedolim, to Rabbonim, and ask them to daven for their cholim. And the Ramban, when Moshe Rabbeinu says, I'm overburdened, and people come, Ridroi Shesu Elakim, the Ramban writes, they come asking for refuahs and Yeshuas. And they give me Kvittel. You know what a Kvittel is? Yeah? People give me Kvittel all the time. But the problem is my Hasidim are not aware that when you give a Kvittel, you also give a Pidyon. When you come to a Rebbe, B'derech Kal you give a Kvittel, there's an envelope and you give a check. My Hasidim give me Kvittel, but they're the type of Hasidim, they don't know how it works. They don't know you need to give a pidyon. But then I think it's better if you don't get a pidyon. It's more L'Shem Shemayim. You know, I have nothing out of this. So you're really daven for people. And I'm afraid if you get a check with every Kvittel, in your heart you hope, oh, there's going to be a lot of Kvittel. There should be a lot of sick people, and they should all come to me, and I'm going to get rich. But if you don't get a pidyon, you daven to a Kodesh Baruch Hu, I'm wasting my time. Rabbeinu Shalom, send refuahs before they come to me. I don't have time. You know, I have nothing out of this. So there should be less cholim. They should all be well, and they should leave me alone. So Baruch Hashem, it's a big schus to daven for people and to feel their pain. So the Gemara says, "Mi sheyesh lo cholim b'techveiso yelech eitzel chochem v'yavach shol avrachamim." The Ramo writes, "Yesh oimrim shemi sheyesh lo cholim b'beisa yelech eitzel chochem v'yavach shol avrachamim." Why does the Ramo write Yesh oimrim? It's a Gemara, and there's no machlekes in the Gemara. Nobody disagrees. So this is a gewaldige chiddush that the Ramo writes, Yesh oimrim. Who is that Yesh oimrim? Well, Reb Pinchas Bar Chama. But nobody disagrees. There's no discussion in the Gemara about this. Why would the Ramo write Yesh oimrim? So there's a fascinating me'iri, and that is source number 10. When the Gemara says, Yelech eitzel chochem v'yavakesh olav rachamim, who is the one that needs to be mevakesh rachamim? Pashtas, the kavanah is, you go to a chochem and you ask the chochem to daven for your family member that needs a refuah. The Meiri says, Yelech eitzel chochem, to learn how to daven, and then go home and daven. Yelech eitzel chochem, and then you should be the one, Levakesh olav rachamim, not the chacham. Let's have a look in the Meiri. La'oilem yehi liboy shel odem batuach shatfila kishinasas kitikono מבטלס es הגזירו. ומי שיש לו צער או חולה בתוך ביסו, אחד ממיני הצורס, ילך אצל חוכם וילמוד הימנו דרכי התפילויס ויבקש רחמים. So the understanding of the Meiri is a chacham is a chacham. And the essence of a chacham is he teaches. He's a teacher of Torah. Your tefillos are just as good as his tefillos. Yelech eitzel chacham v'yilmed darkei tefillah v'yavach shel rachamim. And this is a big discussion, which we don't have on our sheet. But the discussion is, whose tefillos are more powerful? When a person davens for himself, or one that davens for an other? An interesting story in Brochas Tav Hei Amud Beis. Rav Chia bar Abba fell ill. Reb Yochanan and his friend goes to visit him, Bikur Cholim. And Reb Yochanan asks Reb Chia, Chaviven olecho yesurim, do you like pain? Some tzaddikim thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for yesurim because it's a kapora. So Reb Yochanan asks Reb Chia, Chaviven olecho yesurim? And Reb Chia says, no way. Lo yhem v'lo yischoram. I know there's a benefit to yesurim because it's kaporas avonis, but it's too painful. And probably Rabbi Yochanan says, I can't concentrate on my learning. Reb Chia, I don't like Yisurim. And Rabbi Yochanan says, give me your hand. Yov le'yodeh v'oikmei. Reb Chia gives his hand to Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Yochanan gets him up on his feet, and he had a four. Then Rabbi Yochanan falls ill, and Reb Chanina Bar Choma comes to visit Rabbi Yochanan. The three of them were the greatest Talmidim of Rabbeinu HaKadosh. And Reb Chanina asked Rabbi Yochanan the very same question. Rabbi Yochanan asked Reb Chia, Chaviven alecho yesurim? And Rabbi Yochanan responds exactly like Reb Chia responded, but Rabbi Yochanan asked him the same question. He says, Lo yhem v'lo yischoron. And Reb Chanina says, Ten li yodcho, yov le'yodeh v'yokmei. And the Gemara asks, but Rabbi Yochanan did the same for Reb Chia, so why didn't he do it on his own? Why does he need Reb Chia to give him his hand? Why couldn't he do it to himself? Now, I don't know exactly how you do to yourself, Yoav lo yodei, left hand, right hand. I don't know how it works. But the Gemara asks, why couldn't the Rebbe do it to himself, just like he did to Ein chovesh matar atzmo mebeis asurim? When you're locked up in a cell, you can't open it from the inside. You need somebody on the other side of the door that can unlock your cell and give you freedom. Ein chovesh matar atzmo mebeis asurim. So the Sefer Hasidim, in this very same source, says that the same applies to tefillah. Ein chovesh matar atzmo mebeis asurim. And when one davens for another, it is more powerful and more likely to be accepted by a Kodesh Baruch Hu than a person davens for himself. Rebbe Melech Milezhensk says the same in Likutei Shoshano. At the end of the Noam and Melech HaTorah, there's a compilation, Likutei Shoshano. There's no seifim there. I think it's the second page. And Rebbe Melech Milezhensk says the same. When a person is ill or he needs a Yeshua, it is better to daven for others than to daven for yourself. The Maharal disagrees. And in the story of Avram and Avimelech took Sarah, and then Avram davens for base Avimelech. They didn't have any children. And Avram davens, and all the women base Avimelech become pregnant and they have children. And the Mizrahi asks, so why didn't Avram daven for himself? Sarah wasn't a Korah. And it took so many years till Bris Bein HaBesorim, till HaKadosh Baruch Hu promises them children. And the Mizrahi says, Ein chovesh matar atzmo mebeis asurim. Avram could give a bracha to Avimelech, but not to himself. And the Maharal says no. When we're dealing with tefillah, nothing is more powerful than when a person davens for his own Yisurim b'shivroin leiv. The story in Brochus is not about tefillah. Yoav leyodei v'ukmei. It's not tefillah. We don't understand what it is, but obviously it's some zgula. And if it's a zgula, it is only there that the Gemara says, Ein chovesh matar atzmo mebeis asurim. But by tefillah, it's not you and it's not him. It's a Kodesh Baruch Hu. And therefore, it has nothing to do with Ein chovesh matar atzmo. When you daven or he davens, it is neither you and nor him. It is a Kodesh Baruch Hu. And if it's a Kodesh Baruch Hu, your tefillahs are more important than the tefillahs of anyone else. And the Gemara in Brochus is not about tefillah. It is about some miraculous, some zgula, yoav leyodei v'ukmei, and it is only there that the Gemara says, Ein chovesh matar atzmo mebeis asurim. So it is extremely important to daven and feel the pain of others. That? I think that's an important source. Ken, V'yishma is Elokim es kol hana'ah ba'asher hu shah. Source number 12 is a tshuva of Reb Shlomo Kluger. A fascinating tshuva. Masa Shahoyo. The tshuva is addressed Lahanagidim Menahale Adas Yeshurin Bekahal Zelochov. Hitzikasani Ruchi Loi Uchel Edemo Al Chilul Shabbos Asher Mishpota Ka'esh Boyer Bekirbi Al Haro Vemekulkeles Asher Nasa Bekeilaschem בשבס שעוברו, אשר הוירה מוירה אחד לחל שבס בחילול אחר חילול, לכתב בשבס קוויטל, ושיסע יהודי יויסה מגימל פסוע שהוא דיורייסה, ובשליחס מויס, חוץ לתחום, אשר גם לפי דעתו מויאף של המעט בכמה מלוכס ולשלוח על ידי גוי, ואויסף אויד חטא על פשע, ששולח שני אנושים יהודים לשני מקוימס עם פדיונס. What was the story? Zlotchev is very close to Brod. And there was a person that was desperately ill in Zlotchev, and he heard that the Bel Zarov is Shabbos and Brod, Reb Sholem, the first Bel Zarov. And he asked that they should write a Kvittel and sell the Kvittel Shabbos to the Bel Zarov. He should daven for him. And that's what they did. And Reb Shlomo Kluger heard about this. And from the very first lines of this tshuva, he wasn't happy about what happened. And he writes a very sharp tshuva, and he says the Rav that gave a heter to do this, he should be fired, and he cannot be a Moira for the rest of his life. He's out. You should look for another parnosa. He could be a carpenter or a plumber or many other things that you could make parnosa, but he cannot be a Rav. And that is a very harsh psak. And that's Reb Shlomo Kluger. So was there any heter to be machal on Shabbos? To send the kvittel to a tzaddik. And the description of Reb Shlomo Kluger proves they did send pidyonis, not only a kvittel. They knew how to do it. So they sent money, and Reb Shlomo Kluger says that was terrible. Kaf HaChaim, source number 13. Kosav Pesach HaDvir, Maser she'ere b'zman ha'megefa b'shnas tov kuf ayin daled, שניגף ראובן ביום שבס קודש בתוך הוא יהיה ושמן אוכב היה בכפר, והכל היה מצטער הרבה שלא נמצא אוכב אצלו. A person was desperately ill and he wanted to see his brother. And he was b'tzar that his brother is not next to him. And his brother doesn't even know that he's ill. שרצונו היו שמספלל על רפאיוסוי. גם הוא ירויץ על הצבס על בונה וקטנים, וכראויס גיסוי של הניגב צורס נפשי קורא לסויפו, תוגל גוי, וציווה שיכתב כסף בלושן תוגרמה, לשמן הנזכר, הוא עומד בכפר, לא הדיע כניש באוכל וניגב, ושיעשה לו שם בכפר איזה לימוד ותפילה, וצעוקה וצדוקה מבטלן לסגזירה, וכן עושו. והגיע הכסף בשבס ליד שמן, וכוס הפסח הדביר, דאין בזה נדנוד איסור. And he said, it's not an Isser at all. Similar story. The difference is, in the story of the Pesach Advir, they did everything al yedei goy. They asked the goy to write the telegram, and it was Beloshen Akum. And the description of Reb Shlomo Kluger is, it was Chilul Shabbos al yedei Yisrael. Does that make the difference? Shuvas Maharsham. And the Misham was one generation later than Reb Shlomo Kluger. Bedvar shiluach telegram letzoyre choyle. And he writes, there was a vikuach between Rabbi Yitzchok Shmelkes and Rabbi Yosef Shol Natanzon, the great poskim of Galicia. Could you send a telegram for the benefit of a person that's sick? And both said, no, you can't. We don't know whether it's a chodesh yesh b'sekona, chodesh she'ein b'sekona, because the Masham doesn't give the details. However, at the end of this tshuva, he brings the story of Zlotchev, the story of Reb Shlomo Kluger. 4 lines from the bottom. Uvde Yodano, be'ir moladeti b'Zlotchev. He says, that was where I grew up, and I was young, but I remember the story. שהיו חולה מסוכן, ובאויס הזמן היה מוירי ורבי הגאון הקודש מהרש מבלז משויפסי שבס קודש בברוד, והיט עדיין יכול לכתוב על ידי גוי בשבס קודש שם החולה ואימוי. Oh, so they did use a goy to write that kvittel. לכתוב על ידי גוי שם החולה ואימוי ושולח לברוד. והיריש הגאון מהרשק ופוסלוס עדיין מלהוירס אויד. And now comes the real shocker of this story. וכבוד מוירי ורבי הגאון הקודש, the Bel Zarov in Israel על הכסוסף, הוא אומר, עכשיו אני מחויב לסאמת שיעסק יכול לרפואה שלא יגרם על ידי זה חילול שבס, וכן הויו שנסרה פה. So the Bel Zarov said, I'm in trouble now, because these guys were Machal Shabbos. I need to see to it the as a for Shalema, because otherwise it would be Chil Shabbos. So I need to make a special effort. And he went that extra mile, and he made an effort, and Baruch Hashem, he had a refuah. I never understood this tshuva. If we're machal Shabbos for a chodesh Sheshvan and he dies, is that more chil Shabbos than if he lives? We did what we needed to do. Makes no difference at all in halacha whether our efforts bear fruit or they're futile. Why does it make a difference? We're machal Shabbos. So this is somewhat of a strange story. The Masham writes, the Belzer got that Kvittel, and he said, when was this Kvittel written and who brought it in the middle of Shabbos? Probably there was an address, Zlochov. How did it get here? So the Belzer said, now I'm in trouble. If this guy doesn't have a refuah shleima, then it's Chil Shabbos. Or to gepoilt a yeshia. But in halacha, would it make any difference whether he has it refuah or not? So obviously, some things are beyond halacha. And the Belzer said, if at the end of the day he's going to have a refuah shleima, then everything was justified. And Baruch Hashem, he had a refuah shleima. I wonder whether they came back to Reb Shlomo Kluger and told him what the Belzer said. Maybe he would retract the tshuva. How would we know? Or maybe to Reb Shlomo Kluger would make no difference. But let's see what the Marsham writes at the end. V'chein hoyesh sheneslapo, ובכל כאגבנה אין לו הוקל, ובפרט בדור הזה אין לו הוקל מכמה טעמים. ועל כי יוצא בזה אמרו, שבס ימלא זויק, ולפי הקרוי ולא בוי. בדור הזה אין לו הוקל. And that goes back 150 years. So, today everybody has his own tzaddik, his own tzaddik ador. And we have no way of, dictating to people who yes, who no. And everybody will be Machal Shabbos just to have his tzaddik and give his brocha. So the Masham writes 150 years ago, Ein lahakol. 16, I don't know the continuation of this story. We need to check it. Agon Reb Mechel Shorkin in his Sefer, Mase shoyu kachoyu, atzadik Reb Shaya Zochavitcher, שאומרים בשם הגרו שמותר לך לשבס ושלחוינו שיש בסכונה לקבל ברכס רב ישעיה. כי מובטח שבחוסר תסקיים ותעשה פרי למעלה. I never heard anything that fits for Reb Sholem Belz and for the Gro. I don't know anything about the story, but it's strange. The Goen said, you're allowed to be Machal Shabbos to get a brocha from Reb Shaya Zochovitcher. I don't know who he was, because it's batuach that his brochas are mekuyim. And the Goen said, you can be Machal Shabbos. I need to ask Reb Michal where this story comes from, but it seems to be somewhat of a strange story. Birkei Yosef, Masa be'ish echod, shemotzos gila achas b'sefer ksav yad ma'odam godel marishonim, למי ששוסח שם המובס, לכתוב לוי, ותכף מקי האודם וחויזה לבריוסוי. And this happened few times, and it worked. And then he goes into a discussion, could you be Machal Shabbos for Zguras? And he brings a story. You could be over on a Shavuos, but not on a Marlocha de Weiss. זהו יש כוסף כמי הזו, ועוסף הצליח. והיו היום ליל שבס קודש עירו, שנערי ישראלס שססו סמה מובס. והתחילה בה דווקי מיסה, ובו אצלו איש הלז בשבס, וקם וכוסף הקמע לנערו ותקר וקיע ועומדה על בוריו. וביום השבס נוידה בעיר כל השנה ולעזור לו במדינה שחיל לשבס, וכוסף ולעשה ביודו, והוא ישב לפיקוח נפש הוא, והיו מגמגמים בדובו. And he brings a story. Masa shahoyo kahoyo, that Adam Godel wrote a kamea for a girl that was the sakana. He doesn't write who this Adam Godel was. But Reb Chaim Palagi has a Sefer Refuah V'Chaim, and he says it was the Rashash. The Rashash was one of the greatest Mekabolim, Talmid of Sha'ari, and he was the one that wrote the Kamea. Reb Sholem Shalabi. Is it the same as writing a Kvittel to a tzaddik? Not exactly, because Kaveh Mumche is a big sugya Masechet Shabbos. Kamea Mumche is like a refuah beduka, and you could go out in the Rishus Harabim. But the big Yosef writes that's only an Issa D'Rabbanan. Here we're dealing with an Issa D'Orais of Kosev B'Shabbos. So, as we see, this is a big discussion. There's another tshuva in Marsham, in which he deals with a similar question. Could you write a telegram on Shabbos? And it is similar to the previous Masham, which is in Chelik Gimel, and this one is in Chelik Daled. And I think that he writes that if the tzaddik is muhzak, that his brachas are mekuyim, then would be defined as pikuach nefesh. So going back to Reb Shlomo Kluger, why was he so angry? In Dinei Pikuach Nefesh and Shabbos, there's a concept of Yesuva Daita. And that's a Gemara in Masechet Yuma and Asif and Shulchan Aruch. A woman was partially blind, but she could see light and darkness. And she was giving birth to a baby. And she was in panic, there's not enough light. But the doctors and the nurses said, we have sufficient light, there's no problem at all. But because of her impaired vision, she was screaming, put on the lights, because she was afraid. And the Gemara says, yes, we lighted more candles for Yesuva Daita, just to calm her down. And from this, the Gemara, the Poskim learn to calm and give comfort for a choyle sheyesh b'sakona is defined as pikuach nefesh. So if a person was a choyle sheyesh b'sakona and he believes in tzaddikim, I would have no doubt at all that it's mutar achar Shabbos for Yesuva Daita. This is what he wants. But one could argue, we could lie to him and say, yeah, we sent the Kvittel to the Belzerov with $1,000. Why do you need to do it? If it's all about Yesuva Daita, then tell him you did. And I say, if that would be our psak, it would work only once. Second time around, it won't work. Because if you're going to write in your Shalas Tshuvos that when a Choyne asks you to do something because he's afraid, lie to him, then it's not going to work. So this would be a one-time psak. So obviously, you cannot lie to a Choyle sheyesh b'sakona. And if it's mutar, it's mutar. And if it's mutar, you do it. And that is Yesuva Daita. So this is a fascinating historical controversy that many Gedolim were involved with. So I think it makes a difference. If the Choyle is cognizant, and it is what he asks to be done, you do it. If the Choyle is not cognizant, and his family wants to send a Kvittel, then the psak would be no. Kadosh Baruch Hu, after all, whatever any tzaddik could do, Kadosh Baruch Hu could also do on his own. Because at the end of the day, it all comes back to him. The buck stops by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We are all shluchim. And if a person is ill, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows, if he could, he would ask the Bel Zarov to daven for him. Then HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, let's skip the Bel Zarov. I could take care of you. You're Shayim Shabbos. You don't want to be nichshel in any of this. Okay, you could turn directly to me. You don't need anyone else, any middleman. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu should send refuahs and yeshuas for Kol Amay Beis Yisrael. So the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim is to see a person and see his pain, and you'll daven better. So a story I told many, many times. Reb Moshe Leib Sassover was one of the great tzaddikim, and he had two great rabbeim, Rabbi Melech Mlezhensk and Reb Shmelke Meniklichburg. And Reb Moshe Leib Sassover said, the essence of Yohavto l'reacho kamoicho, I learned from a goy, from a Gentile. So before I go on and tell the story, some of you might wonder, does a great tzaddik, a founder of a Hasidic dynasty, need to learn anything from a goy? Does that make sense? Makes sense. There was a gentleman, probably you all know, his name is Doma Ben Asina. He lives in Kiddushin Daf Lamed Aleph. That's his address. And the Gemara says, Ad heichen kibud av em. How far does it go? And the Gemara brings the story of Doma Ben Asina. The Chachamim looked for Avnei Ephod, and his father was sleeping, and his feet were resting on the box. And he said, I'm not going to trouble my father's sleep, even if you pay me $1 million. So Chazal had no problem learning from Doma Ben Asina. So the Moshe Leib Sassover said, I was once walking in the street, and I just happened to overhear a conversation between two goyim. Mr. A asks Mr. B, do you love me? And Mr. B angrily responds, aren't you ashamed to ask this question? We've been the best of friends for 20 years. Of course I love you. Mr. A asks, what hurts me? Mr. B says, how would I know? Did you tell me? Mr. A asks, did you ask? Did you inquire? Do you really want to know what hurts me? How could you say you love me if you don't know what hurts me? Said the Sassover Rebbe, how could you say you love me if you don't know what hurts me? But you didn't tell me. Did you ask? If you love a person and you look at his face, you should feel that something is wrong. You should see that something is wrong. And you should ask, could I be helpful? Could I help you in any way? And that is the essence of V'yohavto l'reacho kamoicho. Feel another's pain. So the Moshe Leib Sassover learned this from a goy, and I learned the same from a Yerushalmi in a Dom Daf Lamed. Yerushalmi says, what is V'yahavto l'reacho kamoicho? And the Yerushalmi gives a mashal. A person has a hammer in his right hand and a nail in his left. And statistically, every third knock with your hammer goes on your finger. At least by me, that's the way it is. I don't know by others. So his right hand hurts his left hand. And now his left hand will angrily take the hammer and knock away at his right hand. Are you insane? So you have a wounded left hand. Now you're going to hurt both hands. What are you doing? You're a crazy person. And the Yerushalmi says, that is the essence of V'yahavto l'reacho kamoicho. So he's in pain. Try to alleviate his pain. Feel his pain. And that is the chiyuv lehispalel ala choilo. So even according to the Ramban, that there is no mitzvah of tefillah, But davening for the ill is an exception because there's a chiyuv of Bikur Cholim. And the essence of Bikur Cholim is come to see and daven for him. And davening in the presence of a choila has more effect than davening when he is not present. So that is the essence of Yohavto L'Reacha Kamecha. So, because today is the yortzeit of my late wife, I just want to tell you a story about her chesed and what a type of person she was. So, when her parents were ill, and they were in a facility in Netanya, she used to go visit them every day from Yerushalayim to Netanya. She used to take a cab every day, but that's already my tzidkes, not hers, because I needed to pay for that cab. And it was every day from Yerushalayim to Netanya. But she cared a lot. And so we got to know the drivers. One day, she comes back and she sees a cab on the side of the road that was in an accident. And she somewhat recognized that cab. Isn't that one of the drivers that we know? So she called the company and asked, is everything okay with Itzik? And they told her, no, he was involved in an accident. Do you know which hospital he is in? They said, no, but he was taken to the hospital. So she made frantic calls to all the hospitals in Yerushalayim till she was told that he's in the Cheder Miyun in Shari Tzedek. Instead of coming home, she went directly to the hospital, and he was alone in the Cheder Miyun, and she told him, is your wife coming? He said, she's going to come, but she's not here yet. So she told that driver, I'm with you till your wife comes. You're going to be okay. She took him to the x-rays and to other bdikot. She spent 2 hours at the hospital with this person who he was totally chiloni, wasn't really an old family friend till his wife arrived. Then she came home. She didn't tell me anything about this because she didn't think it's anything special. The cab driver told us the story at the shiva when he came to visit, because she didn't think this was anything, probably in her mind, everybody would do the same. It was the most natural thing to do. So that is about caring for other people and feeling the pain of others and just trying to be helpful. So it's a great thing to daven for others when you're mevakeh cholim, but sometimes it also requires something beyond davening. Because sometimes the easiest thing to do is to say a perek and tehillim. And Bikur Cholim is about davening, but not only about davening, but also about trying to be helpful in any way you could to alleviate pain and to feel the pain of others. And we are one family. Klal Yisrael is one big family, and Kolanu b'nei ish echod nachnu, and we have one HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we're all His children. So we should only hear B'sodas Toivos in Yeshua's and Achomas. Have a beautiful Shabbos.